morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm not quite sure where everyone is, but for those of you that don't know me, I'm Rachel Bevans. I'm the Director of Statistics Division for ESCAP, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all today to our Statistics Cafe. Today's topic is the compilation of input-output tables, and in this session we will demonstrate the process of compiling input-output tables and also their application in policy making. Input-output tables are an important tool to help policymakers to understand the relationship between different parts of the economy and to understand employment patterns. For example, during COVID-19 pandemic, input-output tables offered a glimpse into how a shock in one sector affected other sectors and the economy as a whole. They can also demonstrate the effect of reduced travel on other sectors such as hotels, transportation, and also we can use them to look at the impact on government budget through reduced taxation. They help to explain today. We're going to hear from and also Malaysia, who are going to talk about their experiences in this area, which we hope will help to answer your questions regarding input-output tables and their application. But today we also have Alec Nyasulu, one of our statisticians here at ESCAP, to moderate the session, and I'm now going to hand over to him so that he can introduce you to the speakers and then we'll moderate the session. So thank you very much, Alec, and a huge thanks to the speakers as well. I think you're still on mute, Alec.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks for the kind words and remarks, and for giving us an insight to what input-output tables are. So this afternoon or morning, depends on where you are, we have lined up 3 presenters. 2 will talk about the actual process of compiling the input-output tables. And then we have the privilege of having another presenter who is coming in from the user side, which will also give us a good snapshot. So I'll invite the first presenter, and the first presenter is Miss Etiji Tasria. She is a senior statistician and coordinator of functional regional production accounts consolidation at the BPS Statistics Indonesia. That's the official statistical agency of Indonesia. So Ms. Etij, I'll hand over to you, and you can put up the slide.
Thank you, Alec. Morning, good afternoon, and good day, everybody. I will share my screen.
I forgot to say you have 15 minutes for this presentation, so just be mindful of the time.
Thank you. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Etiji Tasria. I am from BPS Statistics Indonesia. I am here to talk about IRIO, which is Interregional Input-Output Compilation in Indonesia, that we have done compiled in 2019 until 2021, and hopefully we can share some insight to how do we compile the IRIO. First of all, this is the background. Why do we need to compile IO and IRIO tables? So as you know, the sub-regional economic characteristic and performance are sometimes different than their national economy. There are dynamics on sub-regional level economy, which are usually inseparable from exogenous factor outside of the regions. Input-output table play a role in analyzing the interrelationship between industries in one region. but cannot analyze the interrelationship between industries in multi-regional dimension. So there is a need for a more effective analytical tools to inform the interrelationship between regional interconnectivity, which is interregional input-output table. So this is the background why Indonesia need to compile IRIO table. And then from the literature that we got, we see the purpose for compiling IRIO and IO tables are quite similar in terms of in IO table we can see that this table depicting the interrelationship between supply and demand in a province. This IO table also provide overview of the production technology of goods and services in a province, and it can measure the output and income multiplier within a province, and analyze the impact of changes in demand in the supply system for goods and services or vice versa in a single region. While the IRIO is more complex, we can have a detailed pattern of interregional supply and demand, and also we can have production technology which are different between provinces, and we can also analyze the income and output multipliers or interrelationship multipliers between regions and also between industries in a particular region in Indonesia. And also the government can analyze the impact of changes of demand in a region based on what changes happen in another region. The compilation process, we call it the building blocks, which are basically there is a compilation manual or a literature that we base on, and then the data infrastructure in terms of all the data necessary to compile SUTs and IO tables, and also the other instrument to compile the IO and SUT system. The inside blocks is the system that we want to compile. We start with national accounting system, including regional accounting. There is a supply and use system and a set of account. And then there is a reconciliation process, so that we, in the end, we have the SUTs and GDP measure at a current and constant price in a balanced way. And then from SUT, we can transform the SUT tables into IO based on some assumption. If we want to get the IO table in a products by products, we transform it in product transformation. And then if we want to have IO table based on industry dimension, we have to do industry transformation input-output table. So from the manual, System of National Account, Chapter 1, Paragraph 24, we know that the supply and use table provide basic information for derivation of detailed input-output table. They may be used for purpose of economic analysis and projection. So the starting point in this experience of compiling IRIO is to compile SUT table. And then also from SNA 2008, Chapter 28, Paragraph 2, we read that the input-output table cannot be compiled without passing through the supply and use stage, except under a very restrictive assumption. And then from Handbook on SUT and IO table, Chapter 1, Paragraph 16, we know that SUT do not just provide a framework to ensure the best quality estimate of GDP, but also it used as a basis to derive input-output tables. So from these manuals, we can see that it is impossible to compile IO table without compiling the SUT table. In compilation of SUT tables, the classification system is playing a significant role because we have to arrange data based on industries in a column and products in a row. So in Indonesia, the SUT table for the similarity, for the purpose of similarity and standard in integrating data, we set the industry dimension into 17 and 52 industries and 65 products in a row. The completion process is depicted in this slide. At the initial project, there is a compilation of national and regional SUT. So each region and national level SUT is compiled through the compilation of supply and use tables. And then at the second year, we compile multi-regional SUT or MR-SUT 2016 as basis for multi-regional IO or IRIO compilation. So based on the SUT regional 34 provinces, we do reconciliation with Indonesia national SUT to help to check and balance each column and each row in the supply and use system. And then the factor of export and import is transforming. There is a need to transform the factor of export and import in the SUT table into a matrix of interregional export and import. So from this multi-regional interregional export and import matrix, we use it into the system of multi-regional SUT, and then we do the balancing process in this dimension, in the MR-SUT dimension, and then after the balance, after MR-SUT is balanced, we transform the multi-regional SUT into interregional IO tables or IRIO tables. So the work program is starting in 2019 and finishing 2021. The work program began with setting the classification system. We choose 52 industries and 65 products for all SUT regional and also national SUT. And then we built the framework for SUT and IO table compilation process. And then there is a preparation of data processing system, because there is so many data that we need to get together into this framework. We also need to have a regional training for a BPS regional staff in compiling the SUT and IO table. And then also we launch a special survey or input-output interrelationship between region. And then there is also data processing for census and survey data that we collect. And also we use some administrative data from the ministries or institution in Indonesia. And then at the end of 2019, there is a preliminary estimate for SUT both in national and regional level. And then from this preliminary estimate for SUT, we make a valuation metric for trade and transport matrix and also import destination matrix. And then there is a process to transform preliminary SUTs into preliminary IOs. In 2020, 2020, the work program consists of national and regional stakeholder consultation, both in a form of focus group discussion and also in-depth interview to gather some insight on specific issues. And then there is a data processing for special survey on iOS to measure the interregional transaction coefficient. And then there is a need to build SUT reconciliation system between national SUT and 34 SUT regional. There is also process of reconciling SUT both from national and 34 provinces in terms of column and rows. And then there is a draft estimate for SUT both in national level and also 34 provinces. The valuation metric compilation also being done at this stage to transform the SUT table into IO draft IO in 2022 at 2020. In 2021, we built the interregional matrix reconciliation system, and then from this system we built the multi-regional SUT or MR and IRIO framework. And then there is also national and regional, again, stakeholder consultation, both in focus group discussion and in-depth interview for specific issues. And then we calculate interregional transaction matrix, both in terms of interregional import matrix and interregional export matrix. And then there is a process of reconciling 34 interregional import and export matrix, and then reconciling MR SUT with national SUT. And then there is a process of transforming MR SUT into IRIO. Then at 30 April, we launched the data of IRIO Indonesia. And at the end of August until early October, there were a series of webinars to socialize the IO and IRIO compilation for regional stakeholder. And then at the end of 2021, the IRIO Indonesia publication is launched in BPS website. So this is the work program in the 3 years. The first step is to compile supply and use framework. We know that supply and use consists of supply table and use table. In this framework, the dimension for domestic output and intermediate use matrix are not square or rectangular. In terms of the number of column, basically different from the number of row, because in SUT framework we use industry classification in column and product classification in rows. So supply and use table also depicted production account and generation of income account in the integrated ways. There is also 3 identity that we have to check in compiling supply and use. First identity is total supply must equal total use in each product, and the second identity is total output must equal total input in each column. And then the third identity is the gross value added in a production approach must equal to gross value added in income approach. And there is also this most important identity is a GDP production equal GDP income and GDP expenditure in the SUT framework. Before we get this identity match or we confirm, we cannot have SUT in a balanced way. After the
I think you should be winding up now.
Okay. Okay. I just want to show the key finding. First key finding in the compilation, we can show the supply and demand in each provinces. This is for DKI Jakarta, and also we can demonstrate the inter and intra-island output transaction between regions. And then we can also inform the interregional relationship between region in terms of how changes in demand in a province, for example, in West Kalimantan, affecting other provinces and by how much the effect took place. The lesson learned with the process of compilation of IRIO Indonesia 2016, 2016 is one, we need a comprehensive and quality data as well as management support, data processing system, communication skill, and robust but adaptive planning, because during the compilation years, there is a pandemic that started in Indonesia in early 2020 that forced us to adapt the situation that for example, we have to work from remote and do the meeting in online way, and then the launch for survey also done in online platform. Some issues remain, such as good quality data on interregional trade, re-export, and treatment among region, merchanting issues, and etc. But we believe in the future there are opportunity to improve these issues. This is the same documentation for our publicities. There is a launching event, and then there is a webinars hosted by 34 provinces in Indonesia. The dissemination process is done through our website. You can download the publication, also the data from our BPS website. And also you can download the regional input-output table in BPS regional website. Thank you all for this opportunity. I will give the floor back to Alik.
Thank you very much for your very colorful and quite comprehensive and detailed presentation. I know we are trying to manage time, but I think I'll allow for some questions. I've seen some questions in the chat from Tracy Wilkinson. So, teacher, can I just read out the questions for you? Or if you've read them in the chat. But the first question is, how do you get data on interregional trade? Is that from the special survey?
The first question is, yes, we have the data from a special survey, but also we have a consultation process with stakeholders and in-depth interview with some of the businesses that done regional trade among a region in Indonesia. Yeah.
And then this second question from the same colleague, Tracy Wilkinson. So she says, so I follow your work program slide, right? You derived interregional imports and export matrices from regional supply and use input-output tables?
Yeah. From a single region SUTs and also in the national SUTs, we have a column of import and a column of export. From this factor of export and import, we try to disaggregate into a matrix form so that we can see the transaction between industries and products between regions. The dimension for this factor is transformed into a matrix way, and then also transform in 34 regions. So there is a 3-dimension matrix for interregional import and export. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm sure there'll be other questions, but we can hang on for the moment. So at this juncture, I'll invite Ms. Rusnani Hussein from the Department of Statistics, Malaysia. She is the Deputy Director of Economic Indicators Division and she's responsible for managing programs and activities for compiling as well as analyzing benchmark input, output tables, regional input, output tables, and updated input and output tables. So, Lusnani, you have the floor, and please, you have 15 minutes.
Hi, Ali. Thank you. You hear mine?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you put up your slides?
Okay, I share.
While we wait for that technical bit, if you have any questions, please do put up your questions on the chat, and then we'll revert to them later on. Yes, we can see your slides now. You have the floor, please.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Okay, my name is Rusnani from Department of Statistics Malaysia, and this is our outline. First of all, I would like to thanks to the ESCAP Stats Café program for giving me the opportunity to share dozen experience in compiling the input-output table. Okay, my presentation will focus on about input-output table, importance of input-output table, product from SUTs and IoT, and experience, Malaysia experience in compiling of IO tables. And then I share about a special study on input-output analysis and way forward. As I think as we know, the supply and use and input-output table offer the most detailed portrait of the goods and services in the economy. The table provide the detailed analysis on the process of production and the use of the goods and services and the income generated from the productions. IO table is also illustrate the relationship between consumer and producer and interdependence between industry. So IO table are derived from SUT. Okay, the importance of IO table. So we go to the supply and use table. So supply and use table can provide the change in economic structures. And for the production, we can observe the behavior of the productions of goods and services in an industry and study the production of that industry. So for the component export, we can use for examining the use of good and services product, whether it is export oriented or domestic consumptions. And then from SUT also, we can look the contributions of compositions of employee of the industry to identify whether the industry is labor or capital intensive. And for the gross fixed capital formulations, we can study the dependency of an industry on assets. Okay, in the IO table, we have IO analysis, input-output analysis. Commonly, we have two analyses. This is linkages and impact analysis. Linkages analysis is a method of measure the importance of a sector in the production goods and services in the economy, and it's to study the interdependence of supply and demand in a sector. Backward linkages and forward linkages are commonly used in intersectoral analysis. And for the impact analysis, it is measure the economic impact where there is change in the final demand with which is if any changes in final demand, we can see the impacts to the economy. So it also show the direct and indirect interdependency between sector in the overall economy. So frequently used method in analysis, we use the multiplier analysis, decomposition analysis, and price model, and also trade-in value addeds. For the product from SUT and IoT, as we know, SUT is a mainframe for producing the IO table and satellite account, distributions, use of income, and capital account, GDP, and also environment economic accounting CR. So from the IO table, we can get the extension product. They are input IO update, regional IO, and also social metric SEM, and also input-output analysis. Okay, now I share Malaysia's experience in compilation input-output tables. So in compilation of IO table Malaysia, IO table was first compiled in 1917. That is covering just Peninsula Malaysia only. And then Malaysia IO table began in 1978 and followed by 1983 to 1987, 1991, 2000, 2005, and 2010. There is IO table 2015 is the latest IO tables. Actually, DOSA also compile update input-output table for year 2007, 2012, and 2014, and was released for internal circulation only. And following the COVID-19 pandemic, Malaysia has rescheduled the operation of economic census 2020 to reference year 2022. So therefore, the upcoming benchmark IO table for Malaysia will be compiled for year 2022 based on the 2022 economic census. Okay, next for supply and use table, we have a basic table and domestic production table and basic price activity by commodity and domestic use table at a basic price commodity by activity. For the symmetry table, we have a domestic production at a price basic price commodity by commodity and domestic production at a basic price activity by activity. So I also share about the experience compilation of regional input-output table for Malaysia. So the regional input-output tables is an extension of Malaysia input-output tables. The table will portray the regional, inter-regional transaction of supply and demand between Peninsula Malaysia, Sabah, and Sarawak at basic price. That means we have only 3 regions. The regional economy in the Rio table consists of domestic production and imports. Okay, for Rio table for Malaysia, we have Rio table 2010 was first compiled in 2014 and also released for internal circulation in March 2016. And then we have Rio 2015 was released for internal circulation in January 2020. For Rio 2010 and 2015, we have 5 tables with classifications 30 commodity by 30 activities. So in the Rio, we have intermediate demand for intermediate demand and import for inter-region from Sabah, we have 3 regions, and intermediate demand and import for Peninsular Malaysia, and intermediate demand and import inter-region for Sarawak. Okay, in terms of manual classification and data sources, the concept and definitions used for the compilation, the IO table are based on the System of National Account 2008. The compilation methodology is based on the handbook on supply, use, and import output table with extension and application 2018. And we also use the Eurostat manual of supply, use, and import output table 2008 edition. In terms of classification, the compilation of IO table used the Malaysia Standard Industrial MC 2008, which conform to the Standard Industrial Classification of all Economic Activity IC Revision 4. So, and why the commodity classification is based on the Malaysia Classification of Product by Activity MCPA 2009, which is inline the Central Product Classification CPC version 2.0. Household, for the household expenditure based on classification of individual consumption by purpose COICOT. And then for import-export based on harmonized system HS and code standard industrial trade classification SITC, and then compilation for MPs, the code based on classification of purpose of non-profit institution serving household company, and for compilation of government, we use in classifications on the function of government cohorts. The source of data for the compilation of import output table are obtained from the economic census, which is cover agriculture, fishing, forestry, mining, quarry, manufacturing, construction, and services. And we also use the source data obtained from the survey. We have wholesale and retail trade survey and household expenditure survey for the household data. And data also we get from various government agencies. Okay, for the collaboration and engagement in journey compilation import output table, Malaysia was have a collaboration and engagement with international agency and internal agency. So we have involved doesn't have various collaboration with international agency, especially in project for constructing the supply use table and import table. Doesn't has long collaboration with ADB in view the constructing supply and use table and input output analysis, as well as global value chains analysis since 2017. Okay, Dozen also has involved in RCDTA for updating and constructing the supply and use table for selected developing member economy with ADB for year 2014 until 2018. In 2018, 40 until 2018, Dozen have involved in APEC trade in value-added database APEC with US International Trade Commission and Ministry of Commerce China. So
you
yes,
have 3 minutes to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We also have to strengthen and empower the knowledge in import output table with capacity buildings. So for information, Malaysia IO team have attend more than 20 international capacity buildings. Okay, this is I share among the special study on input output table analysis. We have analysis for policy making, So for the impact of economic stimulus package, Prihatin and Penjana, this finding provide input to government to assess the impact of injection undertaken during the COVID-19 pandemic and anticipate the value added generated in the economy to soften the adverse impact. So those also do the analysis on impact price increase of refined petroleum using price model. This analysis is input to government to plan strategy addressing the impact rising the petrol price that will cause the inflation. And we have many analysis to provide the input for the government to do the policy making. So other initiative, we also do analysis for undertaken raising the awareness of importance application of the import of table. We have sharing various platforms such as we do the newsletter, ethical boards and presentation at Congress and at international and at Malaysia Congress. Okay. Way forward, our planning for the several product for input-output table. For input-output table, we plan to publish IO table update for 2019 and 2022, and we also to develop input-output table dashboard with the time series data, chart and interactive. This is provide facility to user to get the data directly from the portal, and then to compile the benchmark input-output table in 2022 from the economic census 2022. And then for the regional IO, we also have to compile state input-output table. We have 12 provisions, 14 provisions for the Malaysians. Okay, for the TIVA analysis, we aim for the further analysis in value-added composition of gross export, review comparative advantage, and global value chains. Okay, thank you. That's all from Malaysians.
Thank you very much, Rusnani, for giving us another perspective of the input-output tables from Malaysia. But before I let you go, there's some few questions coming from the audience. Should I read them out, or you can check them in the chat box? Which way do you prefer? Okay, so there is a question from Bruce, a colleague from Stats New Zealand. His question is there regional GDP measures for a lower level of region, i.e. more regions than the 3 IRO regions? Rusnani, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Can you read this? Can you access the chat?
Yes, I
So there are 3 questions. There's a chat. Yeah, okay. So
regional
can you
GDP
by
measure
Bruce?
lower level of region. Can I for the questions in the regional GDP measure for the lower level of regions? More regions than 3 regions. Or for Malaysia, we have 3 regions.
Okay, so
and
you
we
don't
get the GDP for the 3 regions.
Okay, nothing lower than that, right?
Yes. So can you give an example of where the collaboration with international agency? I think that is I have put in the slide the collaborations.
Okay, so the
That
second
is
question
okay.
is
That is answer the question. Is it a
okay.
mean?
So
Okay.
can you address the second question from Tracy, where she says, can you give an example of where collaboration with international agencies changed your approach to compiling IO tables?
Can you give example from the slide? Okay, from the slide, I think I already put the collaboration in 2019, 2020. We have ADB endorsement collaboration with for embark the input-output table input-output table analysis and global value chains, and we have project with ADB in updating and consulting the supply and use table in 2014, 2018 from ADB.
So in that context, are you trying to say that if something like global value chains was the new dimension to your input-output tables as a result of collaboration with ADB? Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And lastly, we have a question from Mr. Leota from the Samoa Bureau of Statistics.
How many staff involved? For at the time being, I have 6 person involved in input-output table. I have 2 for benchmark and IoT, and I have 3 person involved in regional input-output table and global value chain analysis. Just 6 person include me. That's
okay. Thank you very much, and there might be some questions or comments, but we'll revert to them later on. So I'll now invite Mr. Muhammad Agung Widodo. He is the acting coordinator for spatial planning and regional socioeconomic analysis, Ministry of National Development Planning Indonesia. He will basically focus on giving the user side of input-output tables. So I think something that we statisticians really want to see with respect to the usability of our product. So Mr. Widodo, you have the floor, and you can have your slides up, please. And you will have 15 minutes as I communicated earlier on.
Okay. Thanks, Alec. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, just put it in presentation mode.
Okay. What about my voice? Clear?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Rachel and Alex for providing us with the opportunity to share our experience in utilizing the international input-output table. This is actually a long-awaited tables for us in a planning board, and I would like to use this opportunity to appreciate and thanks BPS, our statistical office, for completing this ERIO last year. So the good thing is that Bapenas and BPS has a good coordination and discussion about the expansion of the previous ERIO. So this new ERIOs actually they, include more industries, which is good for us in planning stuff. Now is include 52 industries and covered 34 provinces, while our previous ERIO in 2005 only include 35 industries and covered 30 provinces. So this is a lot of improvement in our new ERIO table. So I will talk about 3 things here. The first one is country context, why ERIO is very important in our planning and policy formulation. The second one is the use of ERIO for identification of key sectors at subnational level. And the last one is the use of ERIO for policy impact assessment. So see with this one. Now we're preparing for the so-called 2045 vision. So this we envisage that will become an advanced and prosperous countries in 2045. Is an anniversary of 1 century of Indonesia. So based on our assessment and projection, if the economy grows at our traditional trajectory at 5% annually, it would not be enough to transform our economy from middle income countries to high income countries. So at least we have to grow above 6% annually. So government at the moment try to promote selected industries to be promoted, 4.0 industries and high quality tourism. But the challenge is huge, given that our economy consists of some blocks of islands. So during the last 30 years, we see that the shifting in the GDP concentration is not changed much. Between 1983 to 2013, the share of the eastern part of Indonesia only increased by around 2 percentage points. So more than 80% of the economy only circulated in the western part, which is consisted of two big islands, Sumatra and Java. So now we need tools to identify what is the new growth engine for the eastern part of the Indonesia. That's why the IRIO is very important in our policy formulation. So the first thing, the use of the IRIO here is to identify the key sectors in each region. Using IRIO, we can identify the backward linkages and also the forward linkages, and also various type of multiplier effects, output multiplier, income multiplier, as well as employment. So we can identify the industries that give effect not only in fostering growth, but also providing employment, new employment. And also we can use IRIO for identifying intra-regional multiplier effect. This is usually use input-output in single region. But for IRIO, the plus is that we can identify inter-regional multiplier effect through feedback and flow-on effect. So, and also if we include the induced effect, the analysis can be more interesting. So we can see if the increase in final demand in one sector and then is followed by the income effect. And then in the next turn, the increased income can induce the increased demand, and which later on will add the multiplier effect. And this is the result of our analysis and identification, for example. So we can see here the growth target for the next 5 years in each islands. So our proposal is that we need to accelerate the growth rate in eastern part of the region much higher than in western part, while we need to maintain the performance in the western part, which is Sumatra and Java, which is now the home to the manufacturing sector. So in each region, we can see the key sectors. We identify key industries which has a backward linkage index above the average, as well as forward linkage index above the average. But unfortunately, at this point of time, we cannot find more than 2 industries in eastern part of Indonesia which meets both criteria. So we have like some industries as a potential in backward linkage index, but not in forward linkage, and the other way around. But industries that meet both criteria, usually only electricity and transportation. So this is the main challenge for us. And actually, we also combine this area analysis with another analysis like growth, performance, and also GDP share of each industries. So we promote industries with a high share and also growing trend, and then with their potential to deliver like a backwards multiplier or forward effect. So we can illustrate this in our policy formulation. Let's say in the industry got a simulation here in the middle, in the upper diagram. So we can see the backward linkage happen if there is an induce in the increased input demand, whereas the forward linkage effect happen if the supplied industry, which is the right side of the below diagram, increase the final demand, and then it will induce the output increase in the interested industries. So we also combine this not only using Leontief coefficient, but also supply side cost coefficient. So we can use forward linkage here rather than sensitivity index like in the below one. But in the right side on the upper diagram is like a supply side simulation. What happen if the our industry of interest expand their output and then will stimulate the output of the supplied industry? This using supply side analysis using cost coefficient rather than Leontief coefficient. And we also, the good thing about using ERIO table, we can expand our analysis not only one round of the effect, which is if the stimulus happen in region A, and then what is the multiplier within region A, but also the spillover to other region. Later on, the expansion in region B will give a feedback to the region A again. So this will expand further the output of the region A. So if we use the IO table, we only get the result in the second ring. But if we use the ERIO table, we can get the result in the outer ring in the region A. So this is the good thing of using ERIO table. So this is the example of the report and policy and master plan or roadmap produced by Bappenas. We work together with the local government to prepare this master plan by using the ERIO table. So like, for example, we assist the local government of Bali, because Bali is one of the most affected by COVID-19 pandemic, because there is extreme shocks in tourism, which is the main industries in Bali. We also help the local government of Banten, which is in the very strategic position when government expand the toll route in Java Island and Sumatra Island. So this is the example of the planning and policy formulation using ERIO table. And we also use this ERIO table to track the value chains of our supply chains. Like in the report in transforming Bali, like a Bali recovery from post-pandemic, we identify two strategic industries in Bali, food and beverage industries and chemical and pharmacy and traditional medicine. So the industries got the input from other regions, West Java, East Java, and Central Java, in addition to input from local Bali. And then this industry, these two industries supply intermediate output for other regions, East Java, Jakarta, and West Java, and also supply for the domestic demand in Bali. By knowing this linkage, we can tailor-made the policy that facilitate the keys or sectors related with the two industries, for example, transportation, logistic, and so on. And in the last part, Bappenas also used the ERIO or interregional input-output table as the main data source for the so-called policy Bappenas policy modeling. So this is basically a computable general equilibrium model. The main feature is bottom-up approach, so the optimization and market clearing solved at region level, at province level, and then aggregated at the national level. So the simulation can include like fiscal policy and also external policy, for example, trade, export, import related, and also the impact of the disaster, natural disaster, and climate change, and also regional economy. So this is the example of the simulation. For example, we try to compare the, it's like an ex-ante policy evaluation. We compare two proposed projects. The first one is to the improvement in efficiency in land transportation by 10% in all provinces in Sulawesi Island. Yeah? So this is the impact nationally. So in the above a box, we can summarize the aggregate impact in real GDP, household consumption, export, import, employment, and also price consumption price index. So all this represented in a percentage change. But we can also show, using thanks to the ERIO data, we can show the transmission across the province here. So we can see in the map actually the improvement in Sulawesi Island, the island that resembles the K letter here. So not only benefit the provinces within the Sulawesi Island, but also other regions. So, for example, the GDP change from the baseline in South Sulawesi is 0.29%, North Sulawesi is 0.18%, but in West Papua also changed or increased by 0.02%. South Kalimantan in next island also increased by 0.03%. And we compare that simulation with the second one, increased efficiency in sea transportation, while the first simulation on land transportation, the second simulation is on sea transportation by 10% from Sulawesi to Java Island. This is a very important topic in our countries because we are consist of 1,000 islands. So the efficiency in sea transportation will be a key for logistic cost improvement, which currently like make up around more than 20% of the GDP. So it's not efficient actually. So we can see here the total impact is pretty much the same, 0.01 in national GDP, but the change in price index is much higher, although it's 0.00. The reduction in the price index due to the improvement in sea transportation efficiency. But again in here, while in here some region is benefited and some region see their GDP contracted a bit because this is a general equilibrium. Gorontalo received the largest impact by 0.12 from the baseline, while the West Papua 0.02 and Papua 0.01. This is because Sulawesi serves as the regional hub for the eastern part of the Indonesia. There is two main ports in here. One is in the north tip in Manado, and the other one is in the biggest cities in Sulawesi, Makassar. And we also use, sorry?
You have 3 minutes, please wind
Okay.
up.
Okay, this is approaching the end of my presentation. So we also use the ERIO tables using these Bapenas policy model to assess like the counterfactual of the earthquake impact in 2018 occurred in West Nusa Tenggara. It's like a neighboring island in the eastern of the Bali. So using this model, we can see if there is no earthquake, the regional GDP would grow at 1.11%. If we include mining sector, this is a large part of the West Nusa Tenggara because there is a copper and gold mining. Newmont there is very significant for local GDP. So if we exclude that mining sector, the GDP will grow at around 6.67%. But because of earthquake, and then the GDP contracted to minus 0.44%, and without mining, it also lower at 4.82%. So we can compare this is a counterfactual of the earthquake disaster, and also we can assess the impact on inflation rate. For example, because of earthquake, the price increased by around 7.25% compared to only 3.8% if there is no earthquake. So that's all from me, Alex. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and giving us a user perspective to the input and output tables. Maybe I've not seen any questions from the floor, but let me just preempt and find out from you to give us some ideas on what were some of the big challenges you've had using the data that has come from your colleagues in BPS in your work. You are muted, please. Can you just...
Thank you. So actually, there is a need for us in planning board to have a more regular update in ERIO table, but of course this is a very challenging for our colleagues in BPS. So because in a very dynamic economy, so we need because this is one spot portrait for the economy, right? But while if many things changes in other part of the island and many things happen in the other side of the island, so we need more regular updated. So in this case, this new ERIO is actually the updating from what we have into 2005. So already more than 10 years ago. So during that time, we see there is changes in the economic structure and also technology and so on. So, but that's why we really appreciate BPS for completing this new ERIO table, because we already wait this for more than 10 years, actually, Alec.
Okay, thanks. And I'm actually prompted to ask you another question. This probably will address, I'm touching on BPS again. I just want to know how much are you colleagues in the Planning Ministry involved in the design, or just to consult with BPS colleagues so that the IO is actually something that is easily compatible with your needs?
Actually, to be fair, I would like to invite Ibu Eci to tell you how Bapenas staff involved in this compilation of the ERIO. So we actually propose more industries, yeah, because we have analyzed the potential to promote like the new growth engine for the next 20 years or 10 years. So, but again, the challenge in carrying out the survey and also probably the data is not available in some not significant island, like in still undeveloped islands. So some industries probably only concentrated in some islands and not equally distributed across the regions. That's why if we put it in the matrix, so there are so many blank cell. So that's why we discuss this with BPS, how much industry should be included in the table, and also whether the industries included in the table is relevant to for policy purposes. For example, that's we want not only traditional industries but also potential future industries. Yeah. That's what we can give to BPS staff, how we actually need this table to be used in the future.
Thank you. Etich, any reflections on what is coming from the user comments?
Yes, actually, Bapenas is very involved at the beginning.
Can you speak a little bit louder?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Actually, we consult with Bapenas at the very initial stage in 2019. When we want to set up the classification system, we ask them their needs for the classification. How detailed is the need for planners to use these IRIO tables. There was a need for portray digital economy as industries, yeah, and also creative economy industries. And then there is also some from central bank, financial and technology sector need to be portrayed more in a IRIO classification. But we also assess the data availability for this kind of request, and we found that there is not significant support from data that already available in statistical system. But in the future, we hope that I think we make sure that this issue will be covered in the next IRIO compilation process. Hopefully in another 5 years, yeah, Pak Agung. Not in a short year term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And before
you.
I give the session to Rachel, just to notify you that we've shared a few links in the chat box. So there's an evaluation page just to help us do better next time. So please fill out that form. It'll be quite useful for us. And then this session has been recorded and will be available online. And there is a link in the chat as well, so you can always make a reference. And so you get the audios, videos, plus the actual slides for this presentation. So with this, thank you very much. I would like now to invite Rachel to make closing remarks. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alec, and thank you so much to all three speakers. I really enjoyed being able to hear the very different perspectives. And I think what was very striking was that although Indonesia and Malaysia are obviously very different countries, very different kind of contexts, I think what we showed there was that actually some of the processes for compiling the information are actually very similar. And both of you were kind of actually sharing very similar kind of processes that you went through. And I think what those two presentations also really demonstrated is that this process involves a lot of coordination. And as you said, a lot of compilation. You're having to work with different sectors, different ministries, but also working with different regions as well. So we all appreciate that that obviously takes a lot of time. And also a lot of energy and a lot of resource. And then as well, being able to hear from the presenter as well, talking about how you're actually using the information is again, really, really interesting. And I think there what struck me is not that that you're using information about policy choices that you're making now, but also the way in which you're using it to actually kind of plan for the future and doing kind of scenario planning based on that, and how important it is to actually be able to do that, particularly in the light, as you were saying, about things like disasters, COVID, climate change, and how you're really able to use this information to do that. And I think finally, I think really what was very clear as well is the need to actually coordinate between policymakers and producers of statistics, because as we were saying there at the end, this is not without a cost. I mean, producing this information clearly takes a lot of time. It does take a lot of staff to do it, and a lot of energy. So that requires a real kind of it requires a huge effort, and I think there as well, there's that real need as well to really discuss this, to be able to actually balance that need and to actually look at what are those kind of policy needs now, but also to kind of recognise that unfortunately we're not going to be able to necessarily be able to meet all of the policymakers' needs immediately, and some of these things do take time. But it's important that we can start somewhere and then kind of keep building on that work. And I think that's also been very well demonstrated, how you can do that as well. So I would like to really thank all three speakers for their presentations today and for really helping to really bring it to light how important this information is and how it is really making a difference to policy making, but also to actual people's lives. So thank you so much. And Alex, as Alex said, the presentations will all be available. Do also please keep an eye on the calendar for the next session to see what's coming next. But thank you so much for everybody today. And thank you as well to the participants or your input, just for being part of the events as well. And then we can see the next one. Sorry, I wasn't organised enough to look at the title for the next one, but we've got that there. So hope to see you all again soon. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye for now.